Chapter 1, Gingerbread and Serendipity. Jason Adams slid the tray of gingerbread cookies onto the cooling rack, the warm scent of cinnamon and molasses curling through his apartment like a familiar hug. Outside, the city hummed with holiday chaos, horns blaring, shoppers rushing. But inside, his world was calm, cozy, predictable, just the way he liked it. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and glanced around his living room. Twinkling lights framed the windows, a wreath hung perfectly centered on the door, and a miniature Santa perched on the mantel like he owned the place. Jason smiled faintly. He'd love to claim credit for the festive perfection. But the truth was his mother, sister, and aunt had staged a decorating coup the week he moved in. He'd paid for everything, of course, but the result was worth every penny. Coming home felt like stepping into a Christmas card. Still, the silence pressed in sometimes. He didn't mind being alone. He'd made peace with it. But the holidays had a way of amplifying the quiet. No family visits this year. No girlfriend to share cocoa with. Just him, his laptop, and a playlist of old Christmas specials queued up for later. Jason grabbed his coat, patting his pocket for his wallet. Milk. Wine. That was the mission. He opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and froze. She was leaning against the wall across from his apartment, eyes closed, lips curved in a soft smile. For a second, Jason wondered if she was asleep, but then her nose twitched like she was savoring something. He cleared his throat gently. Her eyes flew open. Oh, she straightened, cheeks flushing pink. Sorry, I was just. She gestured vaguely toward his door, then laughed, light and breezy. Your cookies smell amazing. Jason blinked, then chuckled. Gingerbread, fresh out of the oven. They smell like home, she said softly, almost to herself. Then, catching his curious look, she added quickly, I grew up in a small town. My mom baked every Christmas. It's been years since I smelled that. Jason understood more than he expected to. That's why I make them, he admitted. Little taste of childhood. She smiled, and something about it tugged at him, warm, genuine, like sunlight breaking through clouds. I'm Emily, she said, offering a hand. Jason. Her handshake was firm but quick, her fingers cool against his. He noticed the faint scent of vanilla clinging to her sweater. Or maybe that was just his imagination, primed by cookies. I was about to run to the market, he said, nodding toward the elevator. Need milk for cocoa. Emily tilted her head, eyes glinting with mischief. Tell you what, I'll bring the milk if you share some cookies. Jason laughed, surprised by how easily it came. Deal. Great. She pushed off the wall, her boots clicking softly on the tile. Give me 10 minutes. He watched her disappear down the hall, then shook his head, amused. This wasn't in the plan. His Christmas break was supposed to be quiet, uneventful, safe. But as he closed his door and glanced at the cooling rack, he realized he was already wondering what Emily's laugh would sound like over cocoa. Chapter 2, The Milk Deal. Jason had just finished arranging the cookies on a festive plate when a soft knock sounded at his door. He opened it to find Emily standing there, cheeks flushed from the cold, a carton of milk in one hand and a mischievous grin in the other. Delivery, she announced, holding up the milk like a trophy. And before you ask, yes, I paid for it. I'm not running some underground dairy operation. Jason laughed, stepping aside to let her in. Good to know. I was starting to worry about black market cocoa. Her boots clicked against the hardwood as she entered, pausing to take in the apartment. Wow, she said, turning slowly. This looks like a Christmas catalog exploded in here, but in a good way. Jason smirked. Credit goes to my mom, sister, and aunt. They staged a decorating intervention when I moved in. Well, they did an amazing job. Emily's gaze lingered on the twinkling lights framing the windows, the wreath on the door, and the miniature Santa perched on the mantel. It feels warm. Jason felt an unexpected flicker of pride. That's the goal. He took the milk from her and headed to the kitchen. Cocoa coming right up. Cookies are already auditioning for Best Supporting Snack. Emily laughed and followed him, leaning against the counter as he poured milk into a saucepan. So, Jason Adams, she said, her tone teasing, do you always bribe your neighbors with baked goods? Only the ones who look like they might appreciate gingerbread, he replied, glancing at her with a grin. You passed the test. Lucky me. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes sparkling. Honestly, I haven't had homemade cookies in years. My apartment smells like, well, nothing, unless you count burnt toast. Jason chuckled. Cooking not your thing? Oh, I can cook, she said, mock-offended. I just don't do it often. Busy schedule, tiny kitchen, and let's face it, takeout is a seductive beast. Fair point. He stirred the milk, added cocoa powder, sugar, and a pinch of cinnamon. The rich aroma filled the air, mingling with the scent of gingerbread. So, what do you do when you're not negotiating milk for cookie deals? Emily perched on a stool, resting her chin on her hand. Marketing, social media campaigns, brand strategy, all that jazz. It's fun, but exhausting. Jason nodded. Sounds like a lot of moving parts. It is. She smiled wryly. And you? Finance, he said simply. Numbers, spreadsheets, quarterly reports. The glamorous life. Emily laughed. So basically, you make sure the world doesn't collapse, and I make sure people buy things they don't need. Something like that. Jason poured the cocoa into 2 mugs, added whipped cream and slid one toward her. Careful. It's hot. She wrapped her hands around the mug, inhaling deeply. This smells amazing. Secret ingredient, he said, tapping the cinnamon jar. Emily took a sip, her eyes closing briefly in bliss. Okay. This is officially the best cocoa I've ever had. Jason grinned. High praise. They settled at the small dining table, cookies between them like a peace offering. Conversation flowed easily. Small towns, childhood Christmas traditions, the weird quirks of city life. Jason found himself laughing more than he had in weeks, maybe months. Emily had a way of making everything feel lighter, like the world wasn't so heavy after all. At one point, she reached for a cookie and paused, her fingers brushing his. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent a spark skittering up his arm. Jason cleared his throat, pretending to focus on his cocoa, but his pulse betrayed him. Emily didn't seem to notice, or maybe she did and chose not to comment. Instead, she smiled and said, "Next time, it's my turn to cook." Jason raised an eyebrow. Challenge accepted. Her grin widened. Careful what you wish for. When she finally stood to leave, Jason walked her to the door. Thanks for the milk, he said lightly. Thanks for the cookies, she replied, slipping into her coat. Then, with a playful glance over her shoulder, don't forget, I owe you dinner. Jason watched her disappear down the hall, the echo of her laughter lingering like the scent of gingerbread. He closed the door slowly, leaning against it for a moment. His apartment felt different now, warmer, somehow. And for the first time in a long time, Jason wondered if this Christmas might hold more than reruns and quiet nights. Chapter 3: Snowfall and Small Talk. The next morning, Jason woke to the muffled hush of snow. He stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching fat flakes drift lazily past the glass. The city looked softer under its white blanket, like someone had pressed pause on the usual chaos. He had no plans, just a vague idea of tackling laundry and maybe starting that Christmas movie marathon. But the thought of Emily lingered like a melody he couldn't shake. Her laugh, the way her eyes sparkled when she teased him. He told himself it was nothing, just neighborly friendliness. Still, when he grabbed his coat and headed downstairs for a quick market run, he couldn't help scanning the hallway. She wasn't there. Jason shrugged, feeling oddly disappointed, and pushed through the lobby doors. The cold hit him like a playful slap, crisp and invigorating. He tugged his scarf tighter and started down the block, boots crunching in fresh snow. Jason! He turned, startled, and saw Emily jogging toward him, her red knit hat dusted with flakes, cheeks pink from the chill. She slowed as she reached him, breath puffing in little clouds. Hey! She said, smiling. Looks like we had the same idea. Jason grinned. Market run. Yep, I'm out of coffee. And that's basically a crisis. She fell into step beside him, her boots leaving neat prints in the snow. You? Wine, he said. And maybe more milk. Cocoa reserves are dangerously low. Emily laughed. Priorities. They walked in companionable silence for a moment. The city sounds muted under the snowfall. Jason found himself oddly aware of the rhythm of her steps, the way her scarf fluttered in the breeze. So, she said, breaking the quiet, what's your Christmas plan? Family? Friends? Jason hesitated. Just me this year. My folks are in Colorado and work's been, well, you know how it is. Emily nodded. Same here. My parents are in Vermont. Too far, too expensive, and honestly, I kind of like the quiet. She glanced at him, her smile tinged with something softer. Though it gets lonely sometimes. Jason felt a flicker of recognition, like she'd plucked the thought straight from his head. Yeah, he said quietly. It does. They reached the market, shaking snow from their coats as they stepped inside. Warm air wrapped around them, scented with cinnamon and pine. Emily grabbed a basket, Jason a bottle of wine, and somehow they ended up in the same aisle, debating brands of cocoa like seasoned critics. This one, Emily declared, holding up a tin with a flourish. Trust me. Jason raised an eyebrow. Expert opinion? Absolutely. I have a degree in chocolate appreciation. He chuckled. Impressive. Does that come with a certificate? Framed on my wall, she said solemnly, then grinned. Right next to my diploma. By the time they checked out, Jason felt lighter, like the snow had swept away more than just city grime. Outside, the flakes had thickened, swirling in lazy spirals. Emily tilted her head back, catching one on her tongue, and laughed. A sound so bright it made Jason's chest ache in a way he hadn't felt in years. Race you back? She challenged suddenly, eyes dancing. Jason blinked. In the snow. Scared. Her grin was pure mischief. He smirked. You're on. They dashed down the block, boots slipping, laughter echoing against brick walls. Jason wasn't sure who won. Probably Emily, given her triumphant fist pump at the door, but he didn't care. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. And as they stood in the lobby, breathless and grinning, Jason realized something had shifted. This Christmas might not be quiet after all. Chapter 4, Dinner Challenge Accepted. Jason wasn't sure what he expected when Emily said she'd cook, but it definitely wasn't the text that popped up on his phone 2 days later. Emily, dinner tonight? 7 p.m. Bring your appetite and maybe a fire extinguisher. Jason stared at the message, grinning despite himself. He typed back, Jason, should I wear protective gear? Her reply came almost instantly, Emily, only if you're afraid of flavor. He laughed out loud, shaking his head. Protective gear or not, he was curious, and maybe a little excited, though he'd never admit that to anyone but himself. By 7, Jason was standing outside her door with a bottle of wine in one hand and a cautious optimism in the other. He knocked lightly. The door swung open, and there she was, hair swept up in a messy bun, apron dusted with flour, and a smile that could melt the snow outside. Right on time, Emily said, ushering him in. Points for punctuality. Jason stepped inside, greeted by the warm scent of garlic and herbs. Smells amazing, he said, genuinely impressed. Don't sound so surprised, she teased, taking the wine from him. I told you, I can cook. I was prepared for, let's say, creative interpretation of dinner, Jason admitted, shrugging out of his coat. Emily laughed, a bright, easy sound. Well, prepare to be dazzled. Her apartment was smaller than his, but cozy soft lights, a tiny tree in the corner, and a table set with mismatched plates that somehow looked charming instead of chaotic. Jason noticed a candle flickering in the center, its glow painting everything in warm tones. So, what's on the menu? He asked, following her into the kitchen. Pasta, she said, stirring a pot with practiced ease. Homemade sauce, garlic bread, and, she opened the oven dramatically, chocolate souffle for dessert. Jason raised an eyebrow. Ambitious. Emily smirked. Go big or go home. He leaned against the counter, watching her move with surprising confidence. You weren't kidding about the cooking skills. Told you, she said, tossing him a grin over her shoulder. I'm full of surprises. Jason smiled, feeling that now familiar tug in his chest. He liked surprises, at least the kind that came with laughter and the smell of simmering tomatoes. They talked as she cooked, about work, childhood Christmas disasters. Emily once set a gingerbread house on fire. Jason admitted to accidentally gluing his fingers together with frosting, and the strange magic of city snowstorms. Conversation flowed like wine, easy and warm. When they finally sat down to eat, Jason took one bite and closed his eyes. Okay, he said solemnly. This is incredible. Emily beamed. Told you. Challenge officially won, he said, raising his glass. Two surprises. Two surprises, she echoed, clinking her glass against his. Dinner stretched into hours, laughter spilling like candlelight across the table. By the time they reached dessert, perfectly risen souffle, much to Emily's delight, Jason realized something he hadn't felt in years. He didn't want the night to end. When he finally stood to leave, Emily walked him to the door, her smile soft now, almost shy. Thanks for coming, she said. Thanks for cooking, Jason replied. Then, before he could overthink it, he added, next time my place. Her eyes lit up. Deal. Jason stepped into the hallway, heart thudding like he'd just agreed to something bigger than dinner. And maybe he had. Chapter 5, The Christmas Tree Incident. Jason had barely finished clearing the last crumbs from his kitchen counter when Emily's text popped up the next afternoon. Emily. Emergency. Tree lights are staging a rebellion. Send help? Jason chuckled, grabbing his coat. He'd planned a quiet evening, maybe a movie, maybe a book, but apparently fate had other ideas. And honestly, he didn't mind. Emily's door was ajar when he arrived, and the sound of muffled swearing drifted out like smoke. Jason knocked lightly. Come in, she called, her voice tinged with frustration. He stepped inside and stopped dead. Her living room looked like a festive battlefield. A 6-foot tree stood in the corner, half dressed in ornaments, while a snarl of lights lay coiled on the floor like a glittering snake. Emily knelt beside them, hair escaping her bun, cheeks flushed. Jason grinned. Looks like you're winning. She shot him a look, strands of tinsel clinging to her sweater. Don't start. These lights have a personal vendetta. Jason crouched beside her, picking up the tangled mess. You know, they say the key is patience. They also say the key is wine, Emily muttered, gesturing toward an open bottle on the coffee table. Jason laughed. Fair point. He grabbed the end of the strand and began untangling. So what's the plan? Classic white lights or full-on rainbow chaos? Classic, she said firmly. I'm a traditionalist. Good choice. He worked the knots loose, fingers brushing hers occasionally. Each accidental touch sent a spark through him, subtle but undeniable. He tried to ignore it, focusing on the lights, but his pulse had other ideas. Finally, the strand came free. Jason held it up triumphantly. Victory. Emily grinned, relief softening her features. You're a hero. Just doing my civic duty, he said lightly, though the warmth in her smile made him feel like he'd just saved the world. They moved to the tree, looping the lights around branches. It was awkward at first, Jason reaching high, Emily ducking low, but soon they fell into an easy rhythm, laughing when the cord snagged or when Jason nearly toppled an ornament. Careful, Emily warned as he stretched to hook the last loop near the top. If you break my angel, you're buying me a new one. Jason smirked. Noted. When they finally plugged in the lights, the tree glowed softly, casting golden halos across the room. Emily stepped back, hands on her hips, and let out a satisfied sigh. Okay, she said. That's officially gorgeous. Jason nodded, but his gaze lingered on her rather than the tree, the way the warm light kissed her hair, the curve of her smile. For a moment he forgot to breathe. Emily turned, catching his look, and something flickered in her eyes. Quick, uncertain, but there. Jason felt his throat tighten. Say something, he told himself. Anything. Nice work, he managed, voice a little rough. Team effort. She smiled, softer now. Yeah, team effort. They ended up on the couch with mugs of cocoa, because apparently that was becoming their thing. Watching snow drift past the window. Conversation meandered, holiday movies, favorite childhood gifts, the eternal debate over real versus artificial trees. Jason found himself laughing again. The sound easy, unforced. At one point, Emily reached for her mug and brushed his knee. The touch was fleeting, but Jason felt it like a spark in the dark. He glanced at her, and for a heartbeat, their eyes held, long enough for something unspoken to hum between them. Then Emily looked away, tucking her hair behind her ear. Thanks for helping, she said lightly. Any time, Jason replied, meaning it more than he expected. When he left later, the tree lights glowed behind him like a promise, and Jason couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas was about to change everything. Chapter 6, Office Party Chaos. Jason hated office parties. Not because he was antisocial, he could hold his own in small talk, but because they always felt like a performance. Everyone pretending to be festive while silently calculating year-end bonuses. Still, attendance wasn't optional. So here he was, standing in the middle of a hotel ballroom decked out in garlands and gold ribbon, nursing a glass of sparkling cider like it was a lifeline. The room buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the faint strains of a jazz rendition of Jingle Bells. Jason scanned the crowd, spotting familiar faces from his department. He nodded, smiled, exchanged the obligatory Merry Christmas greetings. It was fine, predictable, exactly what he expected, until he saw her, Emily. Jason blinked, convinced he was imagining things. But no, there she was across the room, laughing at something a man in a navy suit said. Her hair was down tonight, tumbling in soft waves over her shoulders, and her red dress was simple but stunning, like it had been designed to make his pulse trip over itself. What was she doing here? Jason's brain scrambled for explanations. Coincidence? Fate? Or had he missed something, like the fact that Emily worked for a marketing firm that handled his company's campaigns? That would make sense, sort of. Maybe. Before he could decide whether to approach her, Emily turned, and froze when her gaze landed on him. For a heartbeat, surprise flickered across her face. Then she smiled, slow and warm, and Jason felt the floor tilt under him. He crossed the room, weaving through clusters of coworkers, until he stood in front of her. Small world, he said, aiming for casual but hearing the rough edge in his voice. Emily laughed, a little breathless. Apparently, you didn't tell me you worked for Halston and Company. You didn't tell me you handle their campaigns, Jason countered, grinning despite himself. Guess we both like surprises, she said, eyes dancing. The man in the navy suit excused himself politely, leaving them alone. Jason felt an odd surge of relief. So, Emily said, tilting her head, are you enjoying the party? Jason glanced around at the glittering chaos. Define enjoying. She laughed, and the sound cut through the noise like a melody he'd been waiting for. Fair enough. They drifted toward the bar, conversation flowing as easily as it had in her kitchen. Jason found himself forgetting the stiff formality of the event, forgetting the spreadsheets and deadlines. With Emily, everything felt lighter, like snow falling on a quiet street, until the karaoke started. Jason groaned as a coworker launched into a painfully off-key rendition of All I Want for Christmas Is You. Emily bit her lip, trying not to laugh, and failed spectacularly. Don't judge, Jason said, grinning. It takes courage. True, she said, eyes sparkling. So, when's your turn? Jason choked on his cider. My what? Your turn, she repeated, clearly enjoying his horror. Come on, finance guy. Show me your hidden talents. I have many talents, Jason said solemnly. None of them involve karaoke. Emily leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I'll make you a deal. You sing one verse, and I'll bake you cookies. Jason narrowed his eyes. Bribery? Motivation, she corrected, smiling sweetly. He shook his head, laughing. You're relentless. And you're stalling, she teased. In the end, Jason didn't sing, though Emily did, belting out a surprisingly good version of Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree. while Jason cheered from the sidelines. She was fearless, radiant under the twinkling lights, and Jason couldn't take his eyes off her. When the party wound down, they walked out together into the crisp night air. Snowflakes drifted lazily, catching in Emily's hair like tiny stars. "Thanks for making this bearable," Jason said quietly. Emily smiled, her breath a soft cloud in the cold. "Anytime." They stood there for a moment, the city humming around them, something unspoken hanging in the space between. Jason wanted to say more, wanted to ask if she'd join him for Coco, or maybe just admit that seeing her tonight had been the best part of his week. But before he could, Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression flickering. "I should go," she said, tucking the phone away. "But I'll see you soon." Jason nodded, watching her walk away, her red dress a bright slash against the snow. He didn't know why that phone call had changed her tone, but he knew one thing. He wasn't ready for this night to end. And for the first time in years, he wanted more than quiet Christmases and safe routines. He wanted her. Chapter 7, The Gift Exchange. Jason had never been the type to obsess over gifts. A bottle of wine, a box of chocolates, done. But this year felt different. This year, he found himself standing in a boutique shop 2 days before Christmas, staring at a display of hand-knit scarves like they held the secrets of the universe. Emily deserved something thoughtful, something that said he'd been paying attention. He remembered her laughing about burnt toast, her love for Coco, the way she tilted her head when she talked about Vermont winters. The scarf seemed right, warm, personal. He picked a deep forest green, rich and elegant, like the color of pine trees after snowfall, and hoped it would make her smile. By the time he got home, snow was falling again, thick and lazy, blanketing the city in quiet magic. Jason wrapped the scarf carefully, added a small handwritten note, for the cold days and the warm ones too, and set it on his counter. He told himself it wasn't a big deal, just a neighborly gesture, nothing more, except it was more, and he knew it. Emily knocked that evening, cheeks pink from the cold, a small box in her hands. "Gift exchange," she announced, stepping inside with a grin. "Because apparently that's what neighbors do now." Jason laughed, taking her coat. "I thought neighbors just borrowed sugar." "Times have changed," she said solemnly, then broke into a smile. "Merry Christmas, Jason." "Merry Christmas," he echoed, handing her the green-wrapped package. They sat on the couch, tree lights casting soft halos across the room. Emily opened her gift first, peeling back the paper with exaggerated care. When the scarf spilled into her hands, her breath caught. "Jason." Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "This is beautiful." Jason shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Figured you could use something warm." Emily ran her fingers over the knit, eyes shining. "I love it, really." Relief washed through him, warm and unexpected. "Glad to hear it." "Your turn," she said, pushing the small box toward him. Jason opened it and froze. Inside was a sleek, stainless steel cocoa whisk, engraved with tiny snowflakes. He stared, then laughed, the sound bubbling up like champagne. "You remembered," he said, grinning. "Of course," Emily replied, her smile teasing. "You take Coco very seriously." Jason held up the whisk like a trophy. "This is perfect." They sat there for a moment, gifts in hand, laughter mingling with the soft strains of carols playing in the background. Felt easy, natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. "Thank you," Jason said quietly. Emily met his gaze, her smile gentle now. "Thank you." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, humming with something Jason couldn't quite name. He wanted to reach out, to tuck that loose strand of hair behind her ear, to tell her that this, her laughter, her warmth, was the best gift he'd had in years. But before he could speak, Emily glanced at the clock and sighed. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." Jason nodded, masking his disappointment. "Of course." She stood, scarf draped around her neck like a promise. At the door, she paused, her hand on the knob. "Jason." "Yeah." Her smile was soft, almost shy. "This was really nice." He swallowed, his voice rougher than he intended. "Yeah, it was." And then she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of vanilla and the echo of something Jason couldn't ignore anymore. He was falling for her, hard. Chapter 8, Misunderstandings and Mistletoe. Jason had been riding a quiet high since the gift exchange. Every time he glanced at the cocoa whisk on his counter or thought of Emily wrapped in that green scarf, a smile tugged at his mouth. Felt like something was building, slow, steady, inevitable, until it wasn't. It started with a text. "Emily, rain check on Coco tonight." Something came up. Jason stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Something came up. Vague. Neutral. He typed back, "Jason, no problem. Hope everything's okay." Her reply was quick but clipped. "Emily, all good. Talk soon. Talk soon. Not see you soon." Jason told himself not to overthink it, but the words sat heavy in his chest. 2 days passed. No knock on his door. No text beyond a brief, busy week message. Jason tried to focus on work, on errands, on anything but the hollow quiet of his apartment. but every time he walked past the tree, its lights glowing softly, he thought of Emily laughing under those same lights. By Friday, he couldn't take it. He needed air, needed movement, so he headed downstairs for a walk. Snow had returned, swirling in lazy spirals, and the lobby smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon. Jason was pulling on his gloves when the elevator dinged, and Emily stepped out. She wasn't alone. A man followed her, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying a box of ornaments. He said something that made her laugh, a laugh Jason had thought was his to earn. Jason froze, the cold biting deeper than the winter air. Emily spotted him instantly, her smile faltering. "Jason," she said, voice bright but strained. "Hey, hey," he managed, forcing his tone casual. "Looks like you've got help." "Yeah," she said quickly. "This is Ryan. He's an old friend." Ryan extended a hand, all easy confidence. "Good to meet you, man." Jason shook it, his grip firm, his mind spinning. Old friend. The kind of phrase that could mean anything, and everything Jason had sworn he wouldn't compete with. "Well," Jason said, stepping back, "I'll let you get to it." Emily opened her mouth, like she wanted to say more, but Ryan was already nudging her toward the hallway. Jason watched them go, the box of ornaments bobbing like a taunt, and felt something sharp twist inside him. That night, Jason sat on his couch, Coco untouched, lights twinkling like they were mocking him. He wasn't angry. Emily didn't owe him anything, but disappointment settled heavy in his chest. He'd let himself hope, and hope was dangerous. He was still staring at the dark window when his phone buzzed. "Emily, can we talk tomorrow?" Jason stared at the message, heart thudding. He typed back, "Jason, sure." The next afternoon, Emily knocked on his door. She looked tired, her scarf looped loosely around her neck, snowflakes melting in her hair. "Jason," she began, stepping inside. "About yesterday, Ryan's just a friend. From college. He's in town for the holidays. Needed a place to crash. That's all." Jason nodded slowly. "You don't owe me an explanation." "I know," she said softly. "But I wanted you to have one." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. Jason exhaled, tension easing just enough for a smile to tug at his mouth. "So, no romantic mistletoe moment with Ryan?" Emily laughed, the sound warm and real this time. "No, definitely not." "Are you sure, Emily? Because I've been down this road before and I'm not interested in being one of many," Jason said calmly. "Jason, I like the time we've been spending together. Ryan is the brother of my best friend from college, and he's engaged to his high school sweetheart. He's literally like a little brother to me." Jason grinned, relief washing through him like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Good, because I was starting to think I'd wasted my mistletoe." Her brows lifted. "You have mistletoe?" Jason reached into his pocket, pulling out a tiny sprig tied with a red ribbon. "Always be prepared." Emily stared at it, then at him, her smile slow and teasing. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe," Jason said, stepping closer, his voice low, "but I'm also persistent." For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. The glow of the tree, the hush of snow outside, the faint scent of cocoa lingering in the air. Emily's breath caught, her eyes flicking to his mouth, and Jason felt his pulse roar in his ears. Then she smiled, soft and certain. "Persistent," she murmured. "Might be my favorite thing about you." Chapter 9, Heart to Heart over Cocoa. Jason had replayed that moment with the mistletoe a dozen times in his head. The way Emily's smile softened, the way her voice dipped when she called him persistent. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it felt like a door had opened, and Jason wasn't about to let it close. The next evening, he texted her, "Jason, Coco? No mistletoe this time. Promise." Her reply came quickly, "Emily, you're lucky I like Coco." When she arrived, Jason had already set the stage. Soft carols playing in the background, the tree glowing like a beacon, and 2 mugs waiting on the counter, steam curling lazily into the air. Emily stepped inside, shaking snow from her hair, and Jason felt that now familiar tug in his chest. "Smells amazing," she said, unwinding her scarf. "You're spoiling me." "Just keeping my reputation intact," Jason replied, handing her a mug. "Best cocoa in the city." She laughed, settling onto the couch. Bold claim. Jason joined her, the warmth of the mug seeping into his hands. For a moment, they sipped in silence, the quiet comfortable, like they'd slipped into a rhythm neither of them wanted to break. Then Emily set her mug down and exhaled. "I owe you an apology." Jason blinked. "For what?" "For disappearing," she said softly. "After the party. I didn't mean to make things weird." Jason shook his head. "You didn't. I just..." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I wasn't sure where I stood." Emily's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. "You stand right here," she said, her voice gentle. "Ryan's just a friend. Always has been. I should have said that sooner." Relief washed through Jason, warm and sharp all at once. "Thanks for telling me." Emily smiled faintly, then looked down at her hands. "Truth is, I've been scared." Jason frowned. "Scared of what?" "Of this," she said, gesturing between them, of feeling something real again. It's been a long time since I let anyone in. Jason's chest tightened. He understood that more than he could say. Me too, he admitted quietly. I've had relationships, but nothing that lasted. Nothing that felt like. He broke off, shaking his head. Like this. Emily's eyes softened. This? Jason swallowed, his voice low now. Whatever this is. Whatever's happening when you walk into a room and everything feels lighter. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, thick with meaning. Then Emily reached out, her fingers brushing his. The touch was tentative, like testing the strength of a bridge. But it held. Jason turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. I don't want to rush you, he said. But I don't want to pretend I'm not falling for you either. Emily's breath caught, her eyes shimmering in the glow of the tree. Jason. He waited, pulse thudding, every nerve strung tight. Finally, she smiled. A small, trembling smile that felt like sunrise. You're not alone. Jason exhaled, the tension melting like frost in sunlight. He squeezed her hand gently, and for the first time in years, he felt something settle inside him. Something solid. Something right. They didn't kiss, not yet. Instead, they sat there, fingers entwined, cocoa cooling on the table, while snow drifted past the window like confetti from the universe. And Jason thought maybe this was better than any kiss, because this was real. This was the start of something worth waiting for. Chapter 10 Christmas Eve Magic. Christmas Eve arrived draped in silver and white. The city hushed under a fresh blanket of snow. Jason stood at his window, watching flakes swirl like tiny dancers in the glow of streetlights. His apartment was warm, the tree shimmering softly, carols humming in the background. But his thoughts were miles away, tangled up in Emily. They hadn't seen each other since that quiet night on the couch. Fingers entwined, words hanging like ornaments between them. No kiss, no promises, just something real, fragile and bright. Jason had replayed it in his mind more times than he cared to admit. At 6, his phone buzzed. Emily, are you busy? Jason smiled, typing back, Jason, not at all. Her reply came almost instantly. Emily, come outside. Lobby. Jason grabbed his coat, heart thudding like sleigh bells, and headed downstairs. The lobby was empty except for Emily, standing by the glass doors, her scarf looped snugly around her neck, cheeks pink from the cold. She turned when she saw him, and Jason felt the world tilt. Hey, she said, smiling. Want to take a walk? Jason grinned. In this weather? In this magic, she corrected, pushing the door open. Come on. The night air was crisp, the snow crunching under their boots as they strolled down the quiet street. Christmas lights twinkled from windows, casting soft halos on the drifts. Emily's arm brushed his now and then, sending sparks skittering through him like fireworks. This is my favorite part of the holidays, she said, her voice low. The quiet, the lights, the feeling that anything could happen. Jason glanced at her, the glow of a lamppost catching in her hair. Anything? Emily smiled, slow and teasing. Anything. They walked in silence for a moment, the kind that felt full rather than empty. Jason wanted to say something, wanted to tell her how much these moments mattered, how much she mattered, but the words tangled in his throat. Then Emily stopped. They were standing under a shop awning, its edge draped with garland and Jason blinked. Mistletoe. A tiny sprig, tied with a red ribbon, swaying gently in the breeze. Emily noticed it too. Her eyes flicked up, then back to his, and Jason saw the spark there. The same one that had been humming between them for days. You planned this, didn't you? She teased, her voice soft. Jason smiled, stepping closer. I wish I could take credit. Her breath caught, visible in the cold, and Jason felt his pulse roar in his ears. He lifted a hand, brushing a snowflake from her hair, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to her eyes, her lips, the quiet thrum of possibility. Emily, he murmured. She didn't answer, not with words. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like testing the strength of something new. Then it deepened, warm and sure, melting the chill from the night. Jason's hands framed her face, her fingers curling into his coat, and for a moment, everything else fell away. The snow, the lights, the years of quiet Christmases. All that existed was this, her, him, and the taste of something that felt like home. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, Emily whispered, Persistent, huh? Jason grinned, his forehead resting against hers. Always. They stood there under the mistletoe, laughter mingling with the hush of falling snow, and Jason thought, for the first time in years, that Christmas had given him more than memories. It had given him a beginning. Chapter 11 The Kiss and the Confession. Jason couldn't stop smiling. Not the polite, work-appropriate smile he wore at meetings. Not the casual grin he tossed at neighbors in the elevator. This was the kind of smile that lived in his bones, the kind that came from something real, something he'd been waiting for without even knowing it. Emily had kissed him under the mistletoe, and it wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise, soft and certain, that the quiet ache he'd carried through so many Christmases was finally giving way to something bright. The next morning, Jason woke early, sunlight spilling across the snow outside his window. He made coffee, stared at the cocoa whisk on his counter, and thought about her. About the way her breath had caught before she kissed him, about the warmth of her hands against his coat. He wanted to see her again. Needed to. He didn't have to wait long. At noon, his phone buzzed. "Emily, lunch? My place. I'll even let you critique my cooking." Jason grinned, typing back, "Jason, on my way. Brace yourself for brutal honesty." Emily's apartment smelled like rosemary and butter when he arrived. She greeted him with a smile that made his pulse trip over itself. Her hair pulled back loosely, cheeks flushed from the heat of the stove. "Hope you're hungry," she said, ushering him in. "I made chicken and roasted vegetables. No fire extinguisher required." Jason laughed, hanging his coat. "You're setting the bar high." They ate at her tiny table, sunlight pooling across mismatched plates. Conversation flowed easily. Holiday plans, favorite movies, the eternal debate over whether Die Hard was a Christmas film. Jason said yes. Emily rolled her eyes. But beneath the laughter, something hummed. A quiet urgency, like both of them knew this wasn't just lunch. When the plates were cleared, Emily poured cocoa into 2 mugs, because apparently that was their ritual now, and settled beside him on the couch. The tree lights glowed softly, casting halos across the room. Jason felt his heart thud like a drum. "Emily," he began, his voice low, "I need to say something." She turned, her eyes steady, waiting. Jason swallowed, every word heavy with truth. "I wasn't looking for this. For you. But I'm glad I found it. I'm glad I found you." Her breath hitched, her fingers curling around her mug. "Jason," he set his cocoa down, reaching for her hand. "I don't want to play games. I don't want to wonder where I stand. I want you to know, I'm all in. No half measures. No standby mode. Just us. If you want that too." Emily stared at him, eyes shimmering in the glow of the tree. For a heartbeat, silence stretched, thick, fragile, electric. Then she smiled, slow and certain, and Jason felt the world tilt. "I want that," she whispered. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time." Relief crashed through him, warm and fierce. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek, and kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper, like every unspoken word had found its voice. Emily melted into him, her hands curling into his shirt, and Jason thought, This is what I've been waiting for." When they broke apart, breathless and smiling, Emily rested her forehead against his. "Persistent," she murmured, her voice teasing but tender. Jason grinned. "Always." And for the first time in years, Jason Adams felt like Christmas wasn't just a season. It was a beginning. Chapter 12, Christmas morning together. Jason woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through his curtains. The city outside hushed under a blanket of snow. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the quiet hum of his apartment. The faint tick of the radiator, the distant carols drifting from a neighbor's stereo. Christmas morning. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel empty. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He reached for it, heart skipping when he saw her name. "Emily, Merry Christmas. Coffee's on. Come over?" Jason grinned, already pulling on a sweater. He didn't bother with wrapping paper or bows, just tucked the small box he'd been saving into his pocket and headed out, boots crunching through fresh snow. Emily's door opened before he knocked. She stood there in a soft gray sweater, hair loose around her shoulders, cheeks pink from the warmth inside. The scent of coffee and cinnamon spilled into the hallway like an invitation. "Merry Christmas," she said, smiling in that way that made Jason's chest ache. "Merry Christmas," he echoed, stepping inside. Her apartment was cozy, the tree lights casting halos across the room, stockings dangling from the mantel like cheerful sentinels. A plate of pastries sat on the table, steam curling from 2 mugs of coffee. "You didn't have to go all out," Jason said, shrugging off his coat. Emily grinned. "It's Christmas. All out is mandatory." They settled on the couch, coffee warming their hands, laughter spilling easily as they traded stories, childhood traditions, disastrous holiday recipes, the time Emily's cat toppled an entire tree. Jason felt the tension of the past weeks melt away, replaced by something steady and bright. When the mugs were empty and the carols had faded into soft background hum, Jason reached into his pocket. "I have something for you," he said, his voice low. Emily blinked, surprised. "Jason, you already gave me the scarf. This is different." He placed the small box in her hands. She opened it slowly, breath catching when the lid lifted to reveal a delicate silver snowflake pendant, its edges glinting like frost in sunlight. "Jason." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's beautiful." He smiled, his chest tight with something fierce and tender. "Thought you might like a little piece of winter you can keep." Emily looked up, eyes shimmering. "I love it." Jason reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Emily," he murmured, "I meant what I said. I'm all in. Not just for Christmas. For everything." Her breath hitched, her fingers curling around his. "Me too." she whispered. I'm all in. Jason exhaled, relief and joy crashing through him like sunlight breaking over snow. He cupped her face, kissed her softly, slow and certain, like sealing a promise. Emily melted into him, her hands warm against his skin, and Jason thought, this is what home feels like. When they broke apart, laughter bubbled between them, light and easy. Emily looped the pendant around her neck, the silver catching the glow of the tree, and Jason knew without doubt, without fear, that this Christmas morning was the start of something lasting. Chapter 13 Epilogue. New Year, new beginning. New Year's Eve shimmered across the city like a promise, lights strung from rooftops, laughter spilling from crowded bars, snow glittering under street lamps. Jason stood on his balcony, the cold biting at his cheeks, watching fireworks bloom in the distance like flowers made of fire. Behind him, Emily's laughter floated from the kitchen, mingling with the soft strains of music. She appeared a moment later, 2 flutes of champagne in hand, her silver snowflake pendant catching the glow of the tree like a tiny star. Midnight's coming, she said, her smile bright and easy. You ready? Jason took a glass, his fingers brushing hers. More than ready. They stepped inside, warmth wrapping around them like a blanket. The apartment looked different tonight, not because of the decorations but because of her. Emily's scarf draped over the back of the couch, her laughter lingering in the corners, her presence turning every space into something alive. Jason raised his glass. To new beginnings. Emily clinked hers against his, her eyes shimmering. To us. They drank, the bubbles crisp and bright, and Jason felt something settle deep in his chest, a quiet certainty that this wasn't fleeting. This wasn't just holiday magic. It was real, solid, the kind of thing that lasted. When the countdown began on the TV, 10, 9, 8, Jason set his glass aside, his pulse thrumming like the beat of a drum. Emily turned toward him, her smile soft now, her breath catching as the numbers fell away. 3, 2, 1. Jason kissed her as fireworks exploded outside, their colors painting the night in streaks of gold and crimson. The kiss was slow, sure, threaded with laughter and promise, and Jason thought, this is it, this is home. When they broke apart, Emily rested her forehead against his, her voice a whisper. Happy New Year. Jason smiled, his heart full. Happy New Year. Outside, the city roared with celebration, but inside, everything was quiet and perfect. Jason held her close, the snowflake pendant cool against his fingers, and knew without doubt, without fear, that this was the start of something lasting. Not just a chapter, not just a season, a story.